So this is the fifth talk in a series that I've been doing on the Eightfold Path. It started here, I think. And to back up, the Eightfold Path is the Buddha's how-to manual. It's sort of the how to cultivate a mind at peace. Everybody hear me okay? Great.
Maybe a little louder.
All right, I'll turn it up. So the Eightfold Path is the Buddha's how-to manual, how to cultivate a peaceful mind. And it's got 8 elements. And I've been working backwards in a way to freshen it in my own mind. And also because I think it reveals, working in this backwards way, how each step in the path leads very organically to the one after it. And tonight's talk will be on the 4th element, right action. But before I dive into that, I just want to go over the path as a whole. So it starts with right view, which means recognizing that what we do matters. Your actions have consequences. Consequences that will come back and shape the way you feel and the way the world responds to you. This is a very basic conceptualization of karma, right? You can see it as the Buddha did in very cosmic terms, that it will affect not just this lifetime, but many more. Or you can see it in a very basic way, that if you go around being generous, being kind, you're going to feel great, and people will tend to respond in ways that make you feel even better. As we see that clearly, very naturally, the desire to feel better arises. I'm not often on social media, but I was on Substack today, actually, and I happened to notice a video of some guy whose whole shtick is he gives away money, and he films it. I thought that made me feel so good just watching. I'm going to give somebody some money. It made me want to do it, right? So here was this man creating really positive energy for himself. I bet it feels really good for him. And then when he hears that people give away money, I bet it makes him feel even better, right? So just these ripples of positivity. This is karma. So we understand what we do matters. The intention to do things that create wholesome states of mind and wholesome consequences arises naturally. The first thing we do is sort of speech. We want to put that out into the world, right? So right speech is the next thing that comes. How we talk, how we engage with people. Then right action, the subject of tonight's talk, how we move our body through the world. Then right livelihood, which is kind of a structural element. Once we figured out, how we want to speak and act, then how do we want to actually sustain ourselves? How can we work in a way that honors these wholesome intentions? And how can we work in a way that then sets up a basis for our spiritual life and our practice? Once that livelihood is established, the path sort of shifts to this realization that actually everything is originating in our minds. Every moment of the day arises from our mind state. And so we naturally want to cultivate a mind that is clear and that is loving and that is generous. And so this is right effort. We start to say, oh, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm here in a meditation hall or taking a shower or speaking with my mother-in-law or washing the dishes, part of my attention needs to be on this mind, because that's going to determine how all of this goes. So that's right effort. That's the 6th element of the path, that realization that I need to keep a constant attentiveness, apply some energy towards this mental cultivation, and then right mindfulness. I need to watch my mind, know what it's up to, and right collectedness. Can I keep that connection to the breath that we are all practicing? Can I keep the mind collected and steady enough that I can access wisdom, that I don't get lost in the sauce, so to speak? Grabbed by things that are flashy or wound up by things that are repulsive, right? Can I stay cool, calm, and collected? And that is the Eightfold Path. So we're going to zoom in on the fourth element tonight. I do this with my hands. I have a little path. It's a circle in front of me. I don't know if any of you can see it, but since we're at 4, we're down here. Right action. And I want to start with some caveats about right action, especially for a Western audience. The Buddha was not an evangelist. In fact, the Buddha often refused to teach people when they asked him the first time they asked. They would say, I do such and such for a living. I'm a little worried about it. Can you tell me what you think? And he'd say, you don't want to know. And they'd say, no, I really want to know. He'd say, if I tell you, it's going to make you sad. And they'd say, I want to know. He said, are you sure? And they'd say, I want to know. And he said, okay. And then the text would say, and then they were very sad, right? And then they cried. The Buddha said, this is how I've come to see things. Take it or leave it. Go try it out. Tell me if you find the same thing, right? So he was actually very careful about who he taught. He taught people who wanted to learn, who were curious and interested, right? So I'm offering this to you because you all came here and are curious and interested. I have no desire to go share the teachings on right action willy-nilly with the rest of the world. This is not a how the world should be talk. This is what you all might consider doing if you want to feel better, based on the Buddha's observations and my, let's call it 13 years of playing around with them myself. That's what I got for you. If you test it out and find that it's bunk, that's okay. Don't come back. And it's also not about judging other people. This is a recipe for pacifying this mind, creating peace in this mind. In fact, judging other people, I promise you, is a recipe for agitating this mind. Right? So the point of this talk tonight is not to say, I knew it, I'm right, and the rest of these people are yutzes. That's not it. So, with all of those caveats, right action has 3 very simple, at least at first blush, elements. Refrain from killing, refrain from stealing, refrain from sexual misconduct. You may all go home. No, it's, in a way, seemingly simple. And it can be easy to want to blow these off as obvious, but they're nuanced. I've talked about this a lot, so my longtime students probably know what's coming here. But one of the ways that this has played out in my life in a complicated way is how to deal with vermin in the house. Right? It's killing. When my kids saw the dead mouse in the mousetrap and asked me what that was, and I told them it was a mouse that I had killed, and they looked at me with sort of blanched white faces as a fly flew out of the mouse's eye, I realized that I had done something very violent. I knew I was doing something violent, but it hit me in a different way. And we'd gone back and forth about this. There have been years where we don't set the traps or hire the people, and then the mouse population grows. And then somebody in the house gets upset because there's mouse poop in the kitchen, and that feels dangerous, and there's viruses. And then we set the poison in the traps, and then I wake up at 4 in the morning thinking about mouse babies eating poison and dying slow, painful deaths, and then we get rid of all the traps and the poison. And so it goes, right? So I just put that out there to say this is not easy stuff. But there is a feeling. It does not feel good to know that I'm killing mice. I don't like that feeling. So I found myself asking ChatGPT or maybe Google Gemini today about companies that will seal my entire house. They'll send somebody to really go brick by brick and cover all the holes. That's what I was doing while I was thinking about this talk. Because I really would like to protect the family and not kill mice. I could tell you some really gross stories about living in New York City, but I will spare you. But the same fundamental problem applied, only worse. Refraining from stealing, again, tricky, right? Subtle. Do we pirate movies and videos? Do we use Spotify or Netflix accounts that aren't really supposed to be out of the house and share them and, that kind of thing? That's some of the casual stealing I witness amongst friends and family. Does it feel horrible? Probably not. Is there a little something in there? A little, oop, I'm doing something I'm not supposed to? Probably. The parking space that's marked for customers of CVS only. Business dealings where maybe we negotiate from a place of bad faith, right? Or we present something as more of an issue than it needs to be in order to get a better deal. All that. Do we really feel good walking away from a negotiation like that? Right? Does that leave us feeling more wholesome? These are all different, subtle permutations of this concept. Or outright stealing, fraud, embezzlement, all those things. Less subtle, but still very tempting if you read the papers. And then sexual misconduct. This one, in a way, right, over the last 10 years as a society, I think, has been a more active conversation. We are talking a lot more about the nuances of sexual misconduct. It's actually kind of funny. When I was writing this talk, I was like, it is easier in some ways to talk about the nuances of sexual misconduct at this moment in America than it is to talk about the nuances of killing. Another nuance of killing is eating meat. We really don't like to think about what goes on in factory farms. It is horrific. I mean, it is bad. It is really, really awful. And it's almost taboo because it makes us all so collectively uncomfortable to turn our minds to it. But it's there. Suffering on a tremendous scale. Millions of animals living in squalid conditions, babies torn from their parents, brutal slaying. People eat lamb. That's a baby sheep, right? So as a culture, in a lot of ways, we're kind of inured to violence against animals on a mass scale. And it does not have to be that way. There are whole cultures that don't do this. Large parts of India are largely vegetarian, right? So people have figured out how to live and thrive without the horrors of factory farming. Pesticides on the lawn, another one. There are small creatures that die from that. And again, this isn't to judge. This isn't to tell the world how to be. It's for you to think about what will make you feel wholesome at peace in your life. It is that invitation. I don't want to leave sexual misconduct out. Let's just give it a moment, right? That includes flirting with people who are married or in an inappropriate relationship. right? Or I mean, in an inappropriate situation, right? Any kind of sexual innuendos where they don't belong, eye contact that's unwanted in a sexual way, right? Like that all qualifies. In fact, it's funny if you read the monastic code, each rule, there's 100 something, somebody probably knows now, 57, something like that, 213, I don't know, a large number of codes for the monks, and a ton of them around sexual conduct. Because every time the Buddha would set a rule, somebody would do another permutation that was inappropriate, and he would add a rule. No, you can't like stroke a woman's hair as she walks by. You know, you get the point. And this can be uncomfortable to talk about. It can bring up anxiety and shame in us. Maybe at least one person in this room is feeling one of those two emotions right now. And the Buddha was not against those feelings. In fact, shame in the Buddhist sense, and I want to distinguish, we're not talking about I am a bad person, but shame as in I did a bad thing. Some people call that guilt, fine. But that feeling of I did a bad thing, and I'm either a little disgusted with my behavior or I'm scared of the consequences. The Buddha called those two feelings hiri and ottappa. Hiri being I'm disgusted with my behavior, ottappa, I'm afraid of the consequences. And he said they were the moral guardians of the universe. So if you're feeling hiri or ottappa right now, you can say thank you. Thanks for looking out for me. Those feelings are really important. They're actually driving us in the direction of wholesome behavior. My spiritual path began when hiri and ottappa just started beating me over the head, right? Tremendous feelings of shame about how I was living. That was the beginning of this. So I have nothing against hiri and ottappa. And if every now and then we have to feel a little of it to encourage us on a course correction, that's okay. It's unpleasant. It doesn't last. At least if you make the change. If you don't make the change, they just keep coming at you. So in summary, right action is don't use your body to hurt yourself or other people or living creatures. The Buddha said anything with life force and a breath, if you're looking for a technical definition. There's also a lot of talk in Western Dharma communities about what right action means politically. I'm on email threads where, oh, we should march for this and stand up for that and say this and oppose that. And this is right action. And this is what the Buddha said. And this is what the Buddha meant. And for my mind, until I can figure out how to deal with the mice in a way that feels ethically inappropriate, I'm pretty suspect of whether or not I know it all and see the broad picture in a way that I'm ready to stand on my soapbox and tell the rest of the country how to live. That's not a way of shirking my responsibilities. But I've tried to get involved in politics. I made a career of it. I talked about it at my last talk, and often found myself turned 180 degrees around from where I thought I was trying to get to. It's pretty murky. And if you go in there with a head full of steam, judging people and shouting and tearing people down, you're actually creating all kinds of bad karma. So it's really easy to jump into something thinking you know exactly what's right and make a mess of it. And so often for me, when I feel tempted to go tell the world how to live, I just check in to make sure that I've actually got my own house in order. And there are different Buddhist schools of thought on this. I am teaching from what is called the Theravadan school. It's sometimes referred to as early Buddhism. It traces its roots back to Southeast Asia, where a body of texts migrated from India when the Buddha taught and landed in Sri Lanka and Burma and Thailand. And that body of text became known as the Pali Canon. That was the language, Pali, that it was preserved in. It's like Latin. Nobody speaks it. It exists entirely to preserve religious texts. And that school of Buddhism really focuses on getting your own internal world cleaned up. And then maybe as you do that, you start to radiate a kindness that ripples out into the world. But it says, first, go here. Later schools of Buddhism, the Mahayana tradition, from which Zen originates and a lot of Chinese Buddhism, were largely concerned with sort of going out with a fierce heart and, taking on the suffering in the world. That's another philosophy. And some people find that very useful and helpful. And you may want to explore that for yourself. But I'm just giving some context. I teach from a different perspective. Go and explore. See what feels right. But when I do find the suffering appears at my doorstep, for example, there is a checkpoint near my house on Clara Barton Road. So I live on MacArthur, and Clara Barton is how it's a federally owned highway that you use to access the Beltway. And because it's federally owned, there are immigration and customs enforcement agents there who are doing checkpoints. And actually somebody who was coming to help me with something was detained and is still in a detention facility right now in maybe Laytonsville, Maryland. So there's suffering right in front of me, right? Can't avoid it, right? So this isn't a path of avoidance. But the question is, now what am I going to do about this? And what state of mind do I need to act in a wholesome way about this event that's occurred, right? First thing I do is I try to tell everybody I know about these checkpoints, right? And share that information. Offer to support the family, this person who's in a detention center, right? Check in with the other people I know who might be similarly situated to this gentleman. But all of that, and I offer this not to say, do what I do, but all of that happened without having to read the newspaper or get on social media or organize a protest. It was a natural response to the life that's right in front of me. And I think it can be easy to want to look for some grand move out there in the distance. But if you're paying attention, actually the suffering is right at your front door, right? It's the pesticides in the lawn. It's the mice in the basement, right? It's the people who are working in your community who are being taken from their families. But the first priority is to make sure that your mind is clear and connected to wisdom. And sometimes these talks about ethics can feel like Buddhism is sort of a joyless drudge. Oh, don't get to eat hamburgers anymore. No barbecues with my friends. They're really not that big on alcohol because it clouds the mind, so no drinking, But the Buddha described this thing called the bliss of blamelessness. It's the joy of knowing that you are existing in the world without hurting people. And it is real, and you can feel it, right? It feels good to know at the end of the day that you did not cause harm, right? That you did your best to act with care and kindness. And that joy is tremendous. And it lasts a lot longer than a barbecue does if you maintain it. And the last thing I'll say is for those of you who have, like me, killed, right? Or engaged in sexual misconduct or taken something that was not yours, there's always an opportunity to engage with the world differently. There is a famous figure in the Buddhist texts called Angulimala, who, when the Buddha found him, had a necklace of fingers of all the people he'd murdered. And he said, I screwed up. I'm ready to change. And the Buddha said, you might be in for a rough ride karmically for a while, but I'm going to help you. And Angulimala was indeed in for a rough ride karmically, but he still said, it's going to be better if I stop than if I keep going. And the Buddha welcomed him and taught him and said, you can be part of this community of monks because you have committed to stopping. And I can't help your karma, buddy, other than to stop adding to it on the negative side of the ledger. So it's always a great day to turn a new page. And with that, I'll stop. And I'm going to keep the recording going for questions because I did this last time and people still asked interesting questions and I think it was helpful. So just letting you know. But I'll stop there and let it sink in. And if anybody has questions, happy to answer them or respond as best I can. I got a question on light. Okay. Yeah. Good night, Arusha. Maureen.
He made it, right? He got enlightened, the guy with the,
Angulimala?
yeah.
I can't remember the end of his story. I think he might have been liberated. I'll look it up and bring it next time. Because there was a part of me that thinks he might have been liberated, but there's some funny twist in his story. He suffers some consequence that famously is highlighted in the sutta. And I can't remember, is it somebody comes and murders him back, or the Buddha talks about his next life. There's something though that sort of says, he wasn't able to totally, yeah. In the back?
Yeah.
Here, we'll pass you the mic.
Yeah, if anybody's curious, this doesn't seem to do anything, but it actually does.
Does it?
They can
Okay.
hear you.
It says that people on the Zoom.
Yeah.
First, I want to thank you for your talk. A lot of things to think about. It's the holiday season. So what I'm thinking about are edgy, uncomfortable invitations I have to be with family. And I see the edgy, uncomfortable as opportunities for growth. They're at my edge. And where my confusion arises is the aspiration to also be kind to myself. And so the balance is, to what extent do I choose to be in the edgy, uncomfortable and all the turmoil and growth possible, or to be gentle to myself, knowing that maybe it's too much and it's okay to back off. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts about that, negotiating that edgy place.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. Did everybody online hear that? Is that clear? Did you catch the question? Yeah. So my day job, I work as a psychotherapist, And hardly a day goes by that this isn't a conversation in the office. And I think you actually framed it up beautifully. Our relationships with people exist on a spectrum from, you know, we're going to live in the same house together and eat all our meals together, to I'm never speaking to you again. And part of what we do as families, and families are interesting. They're functional units, right? They're the people often that we feel most comfortable asking for money or asking for a roof over our heads, right? Or asking for some type of support, right? Often that's an implicit function of family. Not always, but often. There are people who often know our history in a way that other people don't. So society sort of sees them as a go-to when we need to identify the body or, figure out the best way to take care of somebody. So families have this functional piece. And then there's also this piece of biological attachment. We want, in a very primitive way, to be close to our families, or a part of us does, even when another part of us wants nothing to do with them. And that's where the conflict comes up. That a lot of us feel, I'll talk to people who had horrific childhoods and say, and yet I still want to call my mom and for her to say something nice to me. I don't understand that, right? And it's because there is a part of us that this is just the nature of being human. It just wants that peace within the family system. And negotiating this tension between knowing clearly that somebody has hurt us repeatedly and may never be able to change that behavior and still wanting a relationship with them is a huge part of being a human. And so it's an edge, and really it's an experiment every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every day, of where you want to set that relationship in a way that allows you to feel connected and maybe perform some of those more practical tasks while also not causing harm to yourself or your family. And that fluctuates, right? Because you're not changing. I mean, you're not stable either. You're growing older and then deteriorating, right? Your family is growing older and then deteriorating. So everybody's kind of doing this. And the nature of those relationships and what they need and what they're demanding and what they're asking of us is shifting. I'll talk to people who are suddenly having to help an aging abusive parent use the toilet, right? That's a weird situation to be in. And it's all about what feels right for you. How do you want to negotiate that dynamic in a way that allows you to show up kindly and as peacefully as possible for both parties? And sometimes the answer is, I'm not doing it. Somebody else can take care of that because I can't enter that room in a way that feels safe and appropriate. And sometimes it's, I can grit my teeth and get through it, and that feels like the right thing to do. Is that helpful?
I don't know how to answer that. I guess there's no right or wrong. I guess the impetus behind this is something that you said, is we're all getting older. Everything's impermanent. I guess the pressure I feel is running out of time. We're not gonna, you have an opportunity, and who knows what tomorrow, anything can happen to anybody at any time. So there's that tension of seeing that you may not get another opportunity, and yet what is loving kindness to myself?
Right.
And letting that be okay.
Right.
Yeah, and letting that be okay.
And I think this is where grief plays a very important role, because grief is how we allow something like that to be okay. I never had the relationship with my blank that I wanted. They died when things were still not great, or I can see them deteriorating before I've resolved it. And we grieve. And grief is the physical process of coming to acceptance. That's what we're doing. Our body is sort of shedding or processing an unfulfilled desire to keep something or to get something. And so you'll grieve it, right? If that day comes when it is no longer a possibility, there will be grief. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question about right action, and it follows on some questions from the last time I was here when Sylvia was teaching, and she was taking some questions that I think were probably about right action as well. So you're taking care of, your own behavior. But if something nearby involves something that is violent, and you're trying to figure out, and it could be subtle violence or extreme, your own involvement or your choice to stay out and, let those people be on their own paths. Do you have a way, thinking about it through this Buddhist lens of how to navigate situations like that? And I'm sure you come into contact with stuff like that as a therapist. You're watching people suffer in their own ways, and you're there to help, but not make decisions for them. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Everybody catch the question online? When to get involved? If you see, one person harming another? Thank you, Stacy. It's a learning piece, like the family question. It can help for all of us to just go back in our mental catalogs and think about when we've jumped in and how it's gone. And when we haven't and how that's gone. And I could give you examples in all four of those quadrants, right? One easy principle is that if I jump in and I am not in a wholesome mind state, the result will not be good. The most common example I give of this is when one of my children is hurting another child. If I'm in a healthy headspace, I take care of the kid who was hurt. If I'm in a not healthy headspace, I yell at the kid who's doing the hurting. And then I have two hurt kids. I fail at that, 3 to 4 days a week, and I get it right 3 or 4 days a week. And you can extrapolate that ad infinitum. I don't know if my Latin's okay there, but you get the point. Yeah. And so I think really and this is what I love about this specific Buddhist tradition. This is where right effort comes in. The first step when you see something going on is to check your own mind. It's like always step one. What's going on in my mind right now? If I'm feeling that like flash of anger, if I'm feeling like a tightness in my chest, like slow, that's probably making a weird noise. Slow my roll, right? Like really, this is probably not the right moment to act. And even as a therapist, right? Like giving advice is a dangerous game. So, it's often kind of what if you, like when I offer this possibility, what comes up in you? How do you imagine that would turn out? More can we think about potential consequences than let me get involved in your life and tell you what to do. I've given advice and it's gone poorly as often as it's gone well. So I find that it's better to help people explore and unpack things. Yeah. Is that helpful? Yeah. Mona? Oh, we had a question over here.
Sorry. So I'm kind of new to the group, and I'm here primarily like for knowledge and kind of just seeking out different views. The question that I have kind of regards the violence aspect of what you were referring to, and something that you said was if it has a breath. And to me, the way I think of nature and the world, the earth has a breath. Like nature has a breath, but it's inherently violent. Predation is a natural order in the world. We are of this earth. How does this treat that? Like trees breathe, plants breathe. Where do we fall within this line of thinking where that line is? I don't know if that's really a question, but as you were speaking about it, this was kind of the thought experiment that I was trying to grapple with in my own mind when you were speaking on this.
Yeah, no, it's a lovely question. And I think it really helps to remember what the purpose of these teachings is, right? It's a specific set of teachings for helping this mind be peaceful. So I see the world the same way you do, right? The world is a breathing organism. You know, the trees are letting out the oxygen, we're breathing it in, we're letting out the carbon dioxide, right? You know, even the seasons breathe. You know, things kind of fall in the winter and then rise up into the summer, and then, you know, and predation is part of the natural order. And this is why I drew that distinction between cultivating our own mind versus judging others in life. This practice is not about saying that predation is wrong or that the nature of nature is wrong. The nature of nature just is. But the Buddha said, the nature of nature is also that living beings suffer, and that there's a lot of that actually that they can reduce by shifting the way they move through the world. So you can go be an animal, right? You can go kill things and eat them and do what animals do, you know? A neighbor's dog was in heat recently, and we were talking about how wild that can be, right? Like the way animals interact sexually is like somewhat jarring. I don't know if you've seen it recently. But the Buddha wasn't looking to sort of say that that's right or wrong. He just said, if you want to feel better, try not doing that. And that's it. It's like a very simple, I think your mind will be more at peace and you will be more at comfort with yourself if you do not engage in that way of moving through the world. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I think it is. I think the focus on one's own path is important. Like for me, I think it's the excess of the world, right? Like, you know, my dream is probably a little bit personal, but like I want to homestead. I want to be a farmer. I eat meat. But I want to do it as ethically as I can. And I think part of that is to reduce suffering, right? The unnecessary suffering, and to be grateful for the things that I pull out of the earth, the meat that I harvest, those things. So, you know, I do have an issue with like mass produced butchering and slaughtering and those kinds of things. So it was just something that had made me kind of think, and I appreciate it because that's what I'm here to do. So.
Yeah. And the invitation, I think, is to, you know, as you're homesteading, see how it all feels.
Yeah.
I was on an early date with somebody many, many years ago, and I came into her family's apartment, and her aunt was cutting the head off a chicken right as I walked in. I think they waited till I arrived. And that was when I knew I couldn't be a homesteader.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
I think Ramona had a question over here.
Thank you. First of all, Agunimala did achieve nirvana.
He did. Angulimala
Angulimala.
achieved nibbana. We have a, thank you, Ramona.
I had to Google it.
Yeah, he may have had some unpleasant karmic interactions prior to stepping off the wheel.
So he just made me think of something too. In terms of thinking about when I was typing up the list of all of the different steps in the Eightfold Path, it is all framed as a positive action. And you framed this right action as what not to do.
Yes.
So I'm curious about that. And I have read, I'm trying to decide if I am misremembering that selfishness is a form of stealing. Like when you don't give to somebody who needs, that's a form of stealing. So I'm just curious if I'm misremembering or not.
I'll go backwards. So I've never come across that teaching. Great, that's perfect. About selfishness, but there may be teachers who teach that. So you may be remembering clearly somebody who taught it. I don't think it was me. The Buddha there's a beautiful line where he said, if you knew what I knew about generosity, you would give your last piece of bread to someone who wanted it. Just saying, it will always feel better to give than to do just about anything else. But I think that's different from his teachings on stealing. My understanding of this body of work, other people have other interpretations. And you're right, right action is interesting in that it is defined in the negative. So actually, the teaching on right action is mostly about wrong action. And there's a little bit of a distinction in some of the suttas. They talk about mundane right action, which is just kind of bumbling through life, not killing, stealing, or engaging in killing, stealing, or engaging in sexual misconduct. Noble right action is sort of having this presence of mind such that as you move through the world, you are trying to create harmony and peace and goodwill and kindness, and those things that you're refraining from are part of that larger program. So you could think of it in that way. It's everything else that's wholesome is right action. But in the suttas, it's defined fairly sparsely in that way. There's a couple that expand on it some, but I appreciate you picking up on that. Yeah. And as I said tonight, it's actually a tall order. Just like there's a lot of action I'm going to have to take to keep my house vermin free and not kill the mice. It's going to require time and effort and money. So you end up doing a lot just to live a life that is free from harm. You know, cooking vegetarian meals is so much harder than cooking meals with meat in them. Actually, like preparing vegetables that rot quickly and chopping them and making sure things are balanced and getting enough B12, like my friends just throw a chicken in the oven and then have something to eat for 3 days. Whereas we're constantly pulling our hair out and having to say we're giving the kids pasta again, like for the 3rd night in a row, you know. So it's right action is a lot of work, even though it's defined in fairly simple negative terms. Yeah. Maybe one more question? Yeah. This will be our last question and then we'll close out.
Thanks. It's
Yeah.
not really a question.
Oh, great.
So I guess maybe it lets you off makes the
Yeah.
rest of your evening
So
easier.
just go in listening mode.
Okay. But it's a little bit of a different angle, perhaps, that I would bring in, but I've been reading about near-death experiences like my whole life. And one thing, just to emphasize, you use the expression ripple effect. And that's a common theme in near-death experience writings and experiences. And that most people don't at all appreciate, is my impression, the good that you do when you know, how it ripples out and multiplies when you do things like that. And sometimes sometimes I feel motivated just to go out and be nice to people, go out of my way to be nice to people or whatever. I mean, I think of the building that I work in, the janitor staff, like people just don't even acknowledge that they're there. They're in their own world or whatever. But I make an effort to talk to all, just to acknowledge them and talk to them. But I guess I just wanted to emphasize the point of that ripple effect, that we don't, from these experiences, we just don't really appreciate how important it is to bring that positivity to the world. So
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And that really, I mean, what you're doing there is you're emphasizing right view. Right? Once we see that, when you see clearly how good it makes people feel, when you read those near-death experiences, that cultivates right view in your mind, and then that leads you down this path.
Yeah.
So thank you very much.